Let's not waste time over here. What is up, people? Welcome to Last Call Reacts in the house. I try to do this once a week, even though I'm a little late today, this week, but still getting one in before the live tonight, which is on Fridays at 9 p.m. But I wanted to drop this one in, to keep the consistency, to keep this going on a weekly basis. So let's just, on my chitter chatter, put a halt to that while I get into the story real quick for you guys. So kind of went down the rabbit hole last couple weeks. There's a few things in the rabbit hole that I keep going down here, man. The cave, a literal cave dwelling exploration. I might have to do a video on this, but I think somewhere along the lines it kind of led me to a few things, a little theme if you hang on with me and check this out. All right, so Last Call Reacts. I'm reacting to a couple things over here. I remember a long time ago. Well, actually, let the video tell it for a minute. There's going to be a couple videos, little discussion, and then I want to know what you think about it. So here we go.
Rumors, myths, and mistakes led to his burial site becoming shrouded in mystery. And the question was, where did he go?
Now we're talking about King Richard III. All right, King Richard III, and we're not going to focus on him. This is not what the whole thing is about over here. But in my looking around the news and stuff, and I like, my little nerd thing is maybe some archaeology and paleontology and things like that as well, anthropology. And I noticed a while back how they found this King Richard III over here, highlighted in your Shakespeare plays and all that stuff is what you want to know. But I'm going to speed this up a little bit. Basically, what we're finding here is for 500 years, King Richard III, that has highly been sought after, and they wanted to clear up his history and his legacy, find out what happened to him. Wouldn't you know, like it shows right there in the picture, he'd be found in a goddamn parking lot outside a pub. There you go.
This led one lady to a small parking lot in England, where all of a sudden an enormous clue revealed itself. King's vanished, and the incredible work that went into tracking him down. We modeled the entire thing to show you how his body was found and the 500-year-old DNA test that proved it was really him.
All right, pretty good video over there. It's called The Discovery of King Richard III. It's called Primal Space is the channel. Go check that out if you so would like to, okay? But the main thing that I'm trying to get here is a few things here. Have you heard of Sugarland, first of all? Sounds like a great place, doesn't it? Have you heard of the Sugarland 95? We take it back over to here, the U.S. soil, and talk about what we find under the soil of this great nation here and some of the mysteries that imagine things that are buried. But we'll get into that afterwards. Just open your mind to what you just find a few feet, below the earth here. I got a couple things for you. So here we go, in case you don't know this one.
Working to build a school in Fort Bend ISD uncovered human remains that turned out to be the unmarked graves of 94 men and one woman. It has since been determined they were once part of the state-sanctioned convict leasing program that figured a way around the abolition of slavery by locking up black people, convicting them of often trumped-up charges, and forcing them to work. Dr. Charles Dupree is a...
All right, big story over there. Actually, we could even do a show about that 13th, 14th Amendment. But we know you might as well have been a slave after they so-called declared slavery or they abolished it. They still found ways to enslave you. And we know that at least for the next 100 years, you'd be classified as a second-class citizen, right? And then we have over here a big discovery on our own lands over here in Texas. And look, make no mistake, they call them convicts, this and that. You were released from slavery. You weren't given any trade. You weren't given any status. As a matter of fact, people from Europe moving all over here in the Midwest, given farms and lands and plots, they'll tell you that they started with nothing, which in that side of elitism, they certainly were granted on the other side of nothing. But compared to people that were made second-class citizens legally, that's a dream. That is the dream that somebody could ask for over there as well. So you got sent back into, we'll call quote unquote, if you can't see me, slavery for vagrancy, because you were homeless. You got long, horrible sentences for not having a job, because who's going to hire you as a second-class citizen, ex-slave over here as well? So yeah, they found ways to get you working on the railroad, back on the plantations to do construction and everything else as well. Here we go with the rest of this.
Superintendent of Fort Bend ISD and is here this morning to talk about that. Dr. Dupree, thank you for being here. Would you talk to me about how you were personally affected by the discovery of those bodies there on that site?
Good morning, Kimberell. Thank you for having me. I have to tell you, as an African-American male and leader in our community, this discovery, I'm just going to be honest, it was overwhelming at first because, like you, I've lived the bulk of my life dealing with issues of civil rights, leading in education, and being an advocate for equity for all students, seeing the progress that has been made over time, even though we might have a longer conversation about that on another occasion. But to go back and have to revisit the reality that these individuals were enslaved after slavery had ended.
Like we said, I'm just going to move it up.
And our nation and local citizens had done to these individuals to the benefit of, and reinterring them in 2019. At this point, there's a lot of conversation still about the memorial. Our board is still having conversations with the county about a possible park and memorial area out there that we would do in tandem with the county and other community partners. So we're still looking for community partners.
So Sugarland at first was a sugar plantation of cane, obviously marking the name and stuff. And one of the more, it sounds like it should be synonymous with it, as cruel as slavery was, every aspect of it. But this was even one of the more cruel, horrid places. And upon a doctor's hunch, which he's going to mention, a doctor, academic doctor there, a hunch and like 19 years of research to locate what has happened in here. And I believe this is just a microcosm of not just around the world, but especially here in the U.S., of things you could find in very shallow spots, especially in some of these quote unquote historic spots. But here we go.
But there are some folks in the community that have stepped up and expressed interest, and I'm thankful for that. But there's a lot of ongoing conversations. But I think big picture, there'll be some type of community based memorial park and memorial, whether it be a museum or a education center adjacent to the site. The district is also.
Now they're saying they're not finding marked graves or anything like this, but something like you would find hundreds of years ago in an uncivilized country or territory here by the plantation, and which was also converted, as you hear, to the club of what this was and what they made it into as well. They found 95 bodies, as you heard, 94 what would be men, boys, and women, and they were found in horrid ways. Other reports report that they were found worked to the bone. There's a certain name that's called, also in New York. I mean, you could do your research on this too, to show you how tremendously stressful physically and mentally the labor work and hard work of slaves, that they didn't treat them like human beings. Life expectancy was very low because it shows that they worked to the bone. They had to deform themselves because they were made to work every single day, and they didn't get as much as having their own plot or even a stick or anything like that to symbolize their place on earth before they went.
Looking at building and constructing, designing and constructing some type of monument of memorial in the actual cemetery itself.
So we're about a minute and a half left. The late Reginald Moore was very passionate about this. He was one who was saying that there are bodies here, and throughout this time, he told everybody who would listen that there are bodies are there. Talk about his efforts and talk about
I don't know if they could classify it there as the cemetery. They say that, but another report is like they could tell the bodies were dumped. Like there was no ceremony or anything like that. They were basically dumped. I think they're doing it a little bit too much of a favor by actually calling it a cemetery, which it wasn't. There's a lot. There's a lot of these things. So you think about cemetery as well, or just plots where these horrible things have happened. All right. I've said a couple times on my podcast, the Mississippi burning, right? The in the Freedom Ride when they were looking for the two Jewish guys and the one black guy, or even the search for Emmett Till when they were combing the lakes there in Mississippi. They went to go find 1 to 3 bodies. They found hundreds of bodies in the ravines and rivers when they went combing through. Obviously, life ended short by racism and racial attacks, and this is the way that they got rid of them as well. These guys bury the truth and reality so much they don't ever think it's going to come up sometime later. But here we go. And respects out to this guy, Reginald, already forgot his last name, but the gentleman here that stayed diligent doing his work.
Trying to get all the passionate voices, because there were a lot of passionate, very passionate voices about all of this, to try to get these interested parties all on the same page, or at least as close to the same page as possible.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I don't think we ever were successful in getting everybody on the same page. Out of everyone that was involved in this issue, Mr. Moore, Reginald Moore, he had a heart. He had a true burden
no longer
for
with
these individuals, and he knew they were there for years and years. And so when we did uncover their graves, we worked with him initially to have some good, rich conversations about planning toward the future. Unfortunately,
what do you think should be there? Is it just a memorial? Should they build some sort of museum, something like that? I don't know. Certainly would like to hear what people think. It also reminds me of this.
And buried in unmarked graves. The state of Florida knew about it for over a century. There was a small white building on the campus the boys called the White House. Inside, there was a metal...
This is another one. Have you heard of this one? The Dozier School for Boys. Now, they would take in, but again, they would find these graves during some exploration. One of the universities there in Florida would help with the excavation and doing some digging around and putting some context to the bodies that are popping up. Now, in the pictures here, this is a place, a go-to, where they would send the black boys, basically, and poor white boys that were in trouble or basically didn't belong to anybody or nobody claimed them as well.
Cot, a heavy leather strap, and an industrial fan. The fan was not for cooling. It was turned on to drown out the screams. For 111 years, this building operated as a torture chamber for children, some as young as 5 years old. When those children died, the school buried them in the woods out back and told their families they had simply run away. This is the story of the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys in Marianna, Florida. It is one of the most disturbing cover-ups in American history. On paper, Dozier was a place of rehabilitation. The state statute described it as careful physical, intellectual, and moral training, so troubled youth could be restored as honorable citizens. That was the promise. The reality was a nightmare.
And how did they find them?
And yet, despite all of this, despite a century of allegations, despite investigations, despite the literal unearthing of children's bodies from secret graves, not a single staff member was ever criminally charged. Not one. The passage of time erased physical evidence. Witnesses died. And the state investigated itself and found, predictably, insufficient evidence.
Isn't it amazing that these relics of buildings are around, that they exist, and the horrible things that happen behind these buildings as well. Here's the last one. This is another part of history that they literally try to bury as well. So on top of the detached, the removed from society, declassified information here is showing you how many things, how many institutions the country kind of hid away from you as well. Obviously, if it's black, they're trying to bury it, the history. If you're poor, they're trying to bury your history as well. It's a little bit different. But if you're classified also insane, which many were, many women, I have another thing about that. This is just like men that were tired of being married, where they could commit their wives or whatever when they didn't want to put up with that. Bill Gates would like that system. Anyway, here we go.
So, a geophysical survey of the entire plot of land once
Mississippi.
owned by the hospital will be carried out a year later in 2013, just in the off chance there were more bodies spread out around the large slice of Earth. After the survey concluded, it would indeed result in the discovery of more bodies, not just 1 or 2 or 10 or 100 or 1,000. In total, up to 7,000 bodies were discovered buried in about 20 acres of land.
Jesus.
This was enough to draw national.
So not just one plot, but 7,000. But this is a history in this country of just burying truth. That is horrific and horrific treatment. Now, these are people that, you want to distance yourself from the family. You got to send these certain family members away. This is where institutions could give you, whatever answer they want. And most likely, families are okay with it because you're kind of handling a problem that they didn't want to. Remember the Kennedys there as well, and their sister with that. But 7,000 bodies that they happen to find. They happen to find 95. They'll find more of the bulldozed towns, and the towns that they lit on fire and caused race massacres all over this country too. But this is horrific stuff.
Attention. People are stunned at the sheer volume of corpses this asylum had produced in only about 80 years. Authorities would begin exhuming the bodies for further examination. The coffins they were found in were very small and narrow, with many corpses having to be bent in awkward ways to be able to fit inside them.
Just squished them in.
While the remains were nothing more than skeletons at this point, a surprising amount of information could still be garnered to flesh out these individual stories. Age, sex, height, ancestry, these could all be determined just from the bones, as well as evidence of past trauma. This is where things get even darker. These skeletons were full of huge dents, breaks, fractures, and segments that were soft and deformed as a result of extreme
Does it make you
nutrition.
think? No wonder why they would want to literally bury this history. What a horrible history. But it's stuff that needs to come out. People need closure. We need the truth. We know this place. Don't treat it like Japan or something like that, where you would believe that they have no crime rate or anything like that. Some horrible stuff happened. We need atonement all over the place. I would tell you guys, be careful if you go down the rabbit hole for this stuff. If you find out that is the insane asylum in Mississippi, if you want to look that up, you could also look up the Dozier boys in Florida as well. And of course, the thing I started with is the Sugarland 95. And if you want to go a little further than that, of course, you could look up Richard III in there too. But this is crazy. What lies beneath? What do we do? Is it enough to put a memorial up in there and then that's it? Because I could guarantee you guys walk around a lot of the cities and stuff, and you don't stop to check out the plaques and what was there. People up in Virginia and stuff, Alexandria, they got slave auctioning houses up still. They got some very historic part. One of the first trading posts over there. So what do we do with this, man? Let me know your thoughts. Did you know any of these? Can you think of any others? Man, this is Last Call Reacts. did just that. Thank you for stopping by. Hey, man, check out my live Friday nights at 9 p.m. with my co-host, Josephine. And check out the other stuff on the page. Appreciate you being here. Peace.